Hello. This is not going to be a big production. It is going to be a video that it's going to be the first one that I plan to make more. Um, who I am doesn't matter. Where I'm from doesn't matter. Uh, it's the story. It's it's the journey that I've had, that I've made, that may soon come to completion. That being said, I have some things that I need to talk about. Um, the internet gives us the opportunity to basically immortalize ourselves. Once it's out there, it's out there. Once I post this video, it can be watched. Whether it is or not, I don't, particularly know or care how much or by who. Um, I want as many people to get the message, or at least uh, find a reason to follow the story. Um, in any case, uh, I'm going to begin kind of a little later in my life than the very beginning. Obviously, there's an age period there where everything was basically normal to a degree, but it all changed, and it changed on one day, one night. Um, I went from being this, happy-go-lucky kid to somebody that basically uh, quit being a kid. Overnight, I became something different than what I was. I went from caring about Legos and Lincoln Logs and Matchbox cars uh, to a completely different set of interest, that were basically forced upon me by somebody. More than one person played a role, unfortunately. What happens to me doesn't happen unless somebody else made a decision to allow this to be possible. And that's how my story begins, is when I was 11 years old. Um, at the request of my synagogue, my parents put some people up in our house for the weekend. It was a religious retreat. Uh, People from different parts of the area were coming to participate, and one such person came from Nashville. And at the time, I was living in Memphis, Tennessee. Uh, in case you haven't noticed, I've lost a couple of teeth. Uh, I could Photoshop something in there, but I don't care. The fact is this is very symbolic, this tooth, of that time in my life. Because when this tooth got broken the first time was shortly after this all began. This got knocked out by a baseball that bounced off the asphalt when I was going to field it in the middle of our street. My next door neighbor and one of his friends were over and they were just hitting me the ball. I was practicing. And this ball hit a cluster of concrete that was in the street and just bounced up into my tooth and broke it in half. And the other day, this thing finally completely fell out. You know, what was left of the tooth came out with the cap. For many weeks, I had been dealing with it, kind of like a lion with a thorn in its paw, you know, just waiting for it to be pulled or to come out, and it did. And it's really symbolic of that part of my life because, you know, the house I grew up in, that's where this started, you know, with a guy that was invited as a guest to live in our, to not live, but to be in our house at my parents' my parents let him be there. They let him be there. That wasn't the problem. The problem was not knowing who he was and just allowing him to share a room with your son, your 11-year-old kid. That's, you know, that's kind of bad parenting, right? I mean, did my parents ask for them? Did my parents do this to me? No, he did it to me. But they allowed it to happen because they let him in our house. They had to take some responsibility for that. Did they ever? I believe my mother went to her grave or to her next life regretting that ever happened to me with all of her heart. She never would have wished that on any of her children. But it did happen to me. And, you know, at the time, it wasn't something that I knew was wrong because of the way it was done. It was done so as to be a teacher, basically. You know, I'm in school learning math and English, and history, and, you know, they're not teaching us sex in regular school, not at least how to have it, or not at the age I was at. This was a non-issue as far as school was concerned, you know. Puberty was taught. We understood that our bodies were going to change and, you know, certain things about it, but there was never ever any kind of sexual overtone in school, religious or regular, either way. But this guy decided that he was going to teach me, basically, what sex was. You know, he asked me some questions. I answered him. You know, it was all very innocent. There was nothing overtly traumatic about it, which made it all that much harder to actually understand or realize that it was abuse, that he did molest me and basically committed child rape. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter how innocent it was. To him, it was a game. To me, it was weird, strange, new. Felt good. I really didn't, up till that point, the only person other than my mother or father that actually touched me, or my siblings, but was my doctors, and occasionally the rabbi at our synagogue would give me a hug, you know. Some of my parents' friends would give me hugs. There was never anything sexual about any of it. But what he did turned me on. It gave me a tiny little erection and it turned me on. And he used that as a way to gain my trust. You know, much of what I know today is completely in hindsight. I'm 56 years old now. This happened when I was 11. It never goes away. You can't just erase it. I tried for many years. I medicated. I self-medicated with alcohol. Primarily, alcohol was what I abused the most. I smoked pot. I did some other drugs every once in a while, but alcohol was my poison. It is what actually allowed me to forget and also have more problems. Different problems, behavioral issues. Um, this video is going to be done shortly because I don't know how long they will let me post. So I'm just going to cut this one short. But what this man did to me when I was 11 changed the course of my life. It did so much more than what he actually did to me. It's just never anything that makes sense to me. That how somebody can have this behavior. He wasn't my age. He wasn't even a teenager. He was a grown man, and a religious one, there for a religious weekend. And he took this as an opportunity to teach me sex. And, it takes a special kind of evil to be able to do that so easily. I couldn't imagine myself doing it to a child, ever. It's just not in me to think that that's proper. And it's not. It's one thing to be curious and to have, some innocent touching with kids your own age, but they're just as curious and innocent as you are. That's not what this is. This was completely different. This was years of torture, actually. Physical and mental and emotional torture. It lasted longer than just that first time. And that's where my next story chapter will begin. Thank you.